panelists to introduce themselves. And Flavia, I'll go ahead and start with you, please.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Flavia Moreira. I currently am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Lenovo, but I also own a coaching practice, and I've been helping talent all over the world work with some of the issues that we're going to talk about today, earning their space in the marketplace, their purpose, and their mission. I'm originally from Brazil. You might be asking where my accent is from. So I'm originally from Brazil, and I moved here to Raleigh 4 years ago with my employer. Throughout my career, I've always worked in human resources, in talent development, leadership development, learning, that space. And I'm thrilled to be here today. I loved when I got the invite because it's really aligned to my purpose in life. And I'm really impressed to see the quality of the work that this team of purposeful women and talented women have put together. So I'm very happy to be here today.
Terrific. And may I ask Janelle to introduce herself, please?
Morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining. Just want to echo the sentiments of everyone else. I'm actually an NC State alum, MBA alum, and I was part of the inaugural Innovative Women's Conference. So I was also thrilled to get the invite. One, applaud the Women's Club for this still being a thing. Really excited to see that. But excited to share my experience. So I've been in the marketing space my entire career. I'm currently doing strategic brand partnerships with Walmart. I've also held roles at Target as well as GE. Another passion point for me is I've always been very involved in employee resource groups in the companies I've been a part of. And so mentoring other people in the business, regardless of how they identify, but typically women or Black is another passion area for me. So again, really excited to share everything that I've learned, and hopefully you get something out of it.
Fantastic. Thank you both for introducing yourselves. We have one other panelist who may be joining us in just a little while, and that is Sharron, Harris-Rainey, Rainey Hunter. And so I'm going to move on to our first question. My question today is that our theme is advocating for your life. So what has worked for each of you as you've navigated through your own career, or what perhaps you've seen work for others as they've navigated their careers? Let me start with you, Janelle.
Sure. I think a few things. I will own that it happened much later in my career than I wish to admit, but really finding my voice and advocating for myself. And I think the biggest way that kind of showed up, where I really saw a meaningful change in how I was navigating an organization, was being really intentional about the things I wanted to be known for. From a personal brand perspective. So, perhaps you have a strength and people see that. So for me, for example, I kind of got known early in my career as being really good with analytics, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with analytics, but that's not my personal passion point. And it took some time to realize that when I use my voice and tell people what it is exactly that I want to be known for, or the types of jobs that I want to do, I definitely had more, success and was able to advocate for myself in that way, rather than kind of being pushed into certain things based on what other people perceived my strengths or desires to be. I would also say I'm an empath. I'm thinking of my team right now. They give me a hard time all the time, but really investing in building relationships with people. And that can be, mentoring, that could be vertically, that could be horizontally, that could be down, but really investing in understanding the people around you. It doesn't necessarily have to be personal, but just taking the time to let people know that you see them and you hear them has also had a huge impact on how I've been able to kind of navigate and I think find success the way I have so far.
Wow, fabulous. Great tips there. Flavia?
Yeah, I love, Janelle, what you mentioned, that it took you a while to get to that point in your career. I have to admit the same. I feel like I've been working with talent for many years, and I've always prioritized helping them get their uh, uh, space and their voice out. But it took me quite some time to look at myself and say, well, what am I doing for myself? And I totally agree with you. I think the key aspect is self-awareness, like thinking about ourselves, who we really are, what do we do well, what do we bring to the table, and really deciding what do you want to communicate as your brand to the external world. And it can be actively saying things, so I'm good at this is what I bring to the table, but it can also be indirectly. So what kind of content are you interested in social media days? What kind of things are you posting? What are you liking? What kind of people are you hanging out with? Because these are the opportunities that are gonna show up, right? And another aspect I like to tell people, when I've kind of done it naturally, but I recommend being intentional, which is, what do they get from helping me, right? Everybody loves helping others, and it makes us feel good when we're helping people, but what do they get from me? So really being attentive to what others are looking for and trying to match what I can offer. So if it's a senior person in my company, so what are their biggest challenges in their business, and what do I know about that, or what can I offer? Could I connect them with somebody else? So really that two-way conversation, and not just me, right?
Fabulous. Flavia, I want to follow up on one thing you just said. You talked a little bit about having self-awareness and knowing what you do well and being able to promote that. I work with a lot of our students in the Jenkins MBA program, and particularly those who come from a non-American culture. It can be very challenging for them to get comfortable bragging about themselves, if you will, really promoting themselves. So talk a little bit about that. How do you overcome a shyness or a reticence to sound like you're promoting yourself too much? Talk about why that's so important to feel comfortable sharing your strengths.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that aspect because it's very close to my heart. I consider myself somebody that is naturally like this. So from my culture, coming from Brazil, and I don't know, I think women, I do know that women have this challenge as well. So what I've learned was really asking for feedback. So what I'm telling people about myself, what I'm good and what I bring to the table, is based on evidence. So what I've been able to produce, my impact, and I've heard about that. So it makes me feel more confident and comfortable. So it's based on something that is true and is certified, um, but also changing the mindset a little bit. So I've earned it, right? I've earned those qualities. It's mine. So really changing the mindset. Now, I have to say, I've experienced talent sometimes going a little bit beyond that, and coming across a little bit like as entitled, right? So, I've managed early talent programs like post MBA programs, graduate schemes. So in some cases, I've experienced people coming and say, "Oh no, but I've been told I was going to be a director in 3 years, and that's what I need." So I think there is a good balance between what you earned and what you're eligible for, what you're entitled. So it's not easy, uh, um, but it's something we want to be aware of all the time.
Fabulous. Thank you for that, Flavia. And I see we are joined by our third panelist. Sharron Hunter-Rainey has joined us. Hi, Sharron. How are you? You're muted, Sharron. I'm going to remind you that you can unmute so I can hear you. There you go. Oh, I think we unmuted for you.
I am well.
Wonderful. Sharron, will you take a minute to just introduce yourself to our audience, please? And then just, you can chime in with just a little bit on the first question, how, what's worked for you as you've navigated through your career? You caught us right in time.
Okay, so I'm a chemical engineer with an MBA and a Duke PhD in business. I've worked in corporate and I've worked in academic settings. I led the team that developed Tostitos Scoops, and I have 3 domestic patents and 3 international patents for a moisturizing lipstick with my best friend. I think the thing that works for me is to be flexible. And so I have these grand plans of this is going to happen, it's going to happen on this time. And it may happen on the schedule that I had in mind, but you have to pivot and step outside the context where you are to get things to happen. And so I try to be flexible, and things don't always work out the way I imagine them. But when I look back, I've been in my career for just about 40 years. And looking back, I feel like I've had some really fun experiences. I wouldn't trade any of them.
Fabulous. Thank you. And thank you personally for Tostitos Scoops, because they keep my family very, very happy. Great family. So we're grateful to you for that. Terrific. So one thing I want to ask you ladies is, a lot of times, we talk about such rosy things in these panels. I do want to dip into some of those tougher points. So do any of you have an experience to share that maybe didn't work in your career? Maybe a bump in the road when you were trying to navigate something for yourself, or something, a mistake you saw others doing. And I think I'll start with Janelle on this one, if you don't mind.
Sure. Lucky for me, I haven't had anything that felt like it had sort of like a colossal negative outcome. I will say, when I was early in my finding my voice journey, I wanted to speak up, and my team was having a challenge. This was in a previous role, in terms of how our leader was delegating work. And I kind of raised my hand amongst the team and said, okay, I will put together a plan of how we all kind of collectively feel the work should be delegated, and take it to our boss. The mistake, and Flavia, I think when you were talking about answering the first question about things that do work, is really being intentional about what you're doing, what a business case you're trying to build, how that really helps the other person. I focus entirely too much on the how. Way too, this is the band, this is the work, this is the bandwidth of the group, these are people's expertise, this is how we can start to manage meetings. So the how was very thought through, but I didn't really take the time to articulate for her why this was good for her specifically. I explained why the team would feel better about it from a morale perspective, but frankly, it was one of those things where I had to dig deep, felt I had to be really brave. This was not something I would typically do, had that meeting, and it did not go as I had hoped. But I learned a lot from it, in terms of, it didn't deter me. I've definitely spoken up and asked for things and had more success, but it definitely taught me that I need to frame those things in a way that it's understood the value to the other person. What am I going to get out of this?
Great. Sharron, would you have anything to add?
I had an experience as a summer intern where I think it was my second summer working in the same organization, and we were losing people. And you've only got so many summers between your undergraduate schooling, and we were losing people, and they were not literally giving enough feedback as the process unfolded. So I literally brought all of the interns and co-op students together, and I was actually probably the youngest person in the group, but we literally changed the way the process was done so that people got feedback more regularly, and they had an opportunity to make a difference in how they were approaching the work. And it kind of goes to what Janelle was saying, how they were approaching the work, and also how it benefited both the organization and the intern. And I think it had a lasting impact, because I went back to that same organization. I stayed there for 9 years, and I could see the difference in the way the process unfolded for interns who followed us versus what was happening when we were there. And so I was probably 18, 19 at the time, but I dared to make a change, and it worked. And it was a very painful thing because we lost people that summer. They didn't die, they just left.
Sharron, you're showing radical leadership at a very young age. Well done. Flavia, I'm curious if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think I have a couple of examples. One more recent that I am a little bit reluctant to sharing, I have to say, but I will. But the first one was when I was very early in my career as well. I was a graduate, you know, those accelerated development programs. And I joined the company thinking I was going to be the next head of HR in the next year, because they told me it was a talent development program. And then my first rotation was with global mobility. At the time it was Mercedes. I had lived in Germany, so I think they hired me because of my German skills, to be honest. I mean, my key differentiator at the time. And then they put me on the global mobility team, and my job was to review like contracts and calculate compensation, and that's absolutely not my area of passion. And I was like, I'm gonna die here, and I'm not gonna be the next head of HR. So I went talked to my boss. I didn't feel a lot of support at the time, so what I did was I looked externally and I left the company. So I don't think it was smart. I mean, I was lucky enough to have found a great opportunity with another company, and I continued to grow. It was amazing. But nowadays, I think I was a little bit, you know, over the point. I could have waited a little bit more and been a little bit more humble, and, you know, try and find other things I could learn in that space. Now, recently, my experience has been being an international professional here in the U.S., responsible for talent in another company for the U.S. organization. And many people were challenging me because I did not have the UX experience. Everything I had was outside of the U.S. So what I had to do was to really show what were the transferable skills I brought to the table, and the fact that a lot of things that happen here also happen outside, and I could bring some fresh perspective and external insights. I was reluctant to share because I don't think everybody, all of my stakeholders, I don't think I was able to convince all my stakeholders. So I faced some level of, you know, feeling like I wasn't being valued or I wasn't being recognized. But I think the key learning to me, and I would like to share with you, is also, you know, you got to find your allies, right? You're not going to be able to have everybody, you know, advocating for you and saying how amazing you are. But I'm sure you're going to find a couple of people that can be critical and you know, give you that external validation that we all need. And on top of that, the external validation should not be the most important things. We need to have our own internal validation, and that's what I think I've managed to get to. So now I know my value and I know what I bring to the table. So it doesn't matter much what others think or do.
I love it. A lot of people have picked up on that as an aha moment, Flavia. Internal validation is key. I want to pick up on the point you made right before that fabulous insight and ask you to continue the thought, if I may, which is we know that mentors and allies and advocates can be so important in fueling our careers, sometimes just being the wind behind our sails. So can you share some of your experiences on how can you find a good mentor or an ally in your organization or outside of your organization? And we'll start with you, Flavia, and then I'll work my way back to the other ladies.
Yeah, so I would go back to what I commented earlier around knowing yourself. So what are you trying to develop? What do you need from this person? But then on the other hand, what do they get from helping you, right? And like I said before, everybody loves helping others. And I've heard from very senior executive ones, he said, my mentoring, that's part of my day. You know, I spend all day solving business issues and managing things. And then when I get to talk to a mentee, it's the best part, because I get to fulfill my purpose, and it's so natural. I can be myself. So remember that they get a lot out of the experience, but again, be mindful of what will they get. And then how to go about that, or how to find someone. So after you think about and you identify some people, or maybe some people who can help you find some people, just go and ask. The no you have already. They may say, oh no, I'm too busy, or I don't see a reason, but you can always be surprised. So just go and ask. Now, once you get their commitment, please make sure you're there, right? You're there in a sense of being present, following up on things that you have discussed. Because I've experienced in the work environment, sometimes people reaching out, okay, would you be my mentor? Can you help me? Then we have that first conversation, and then they disappear. So I'm like, how can I help you if you're not helping me to help you, right?
Great, great. Now, would you have anything to add? Have you had any experiences that you can share?
Yeah, I think everything Flavia shared about really understanding yourself and what you're trying to get out of the relationship is huge. I think my personal experience has been, I have had success just asking. Obviously, the theme for me is just ask for the things that you want. And so if I've been in a meeting and been incredibly impressed by the work someone's doing or their approach to something, how they think through strategy, I love strategy. I've sent a note after and say, like, would you mind, not necessarily immediately saying, would you be my mentor, but not being afraid to say that note, send that note and say, I was really impressed by XYZ. Would you mind chatting with me about it because I'm working on something? I've been really explicit with managers and said that, I feel like I'm in a place at this current place in my career. I think I need a mentor. Can you help me? I know a lot of organizations have formal programs. So hopefully a manager or HR manager can help you navigate those things. And then I've been shocked. I recently actually had somebody volunteer to be my mentor, which I was thrilled about, but it kind of goes back to the building relationships. And so just being present, operating, at what I consider for myself to be a really high level. And I guess there was something about that the person found compelling. So always being open to those sorts of opportunities as well.
Great. Before I move on to Sharron, I think I want to just recap, because I think I heard you say 3 ways in which kind of to be open to mentorship. One was sort of let it evolve naturally. Reach out to someone that you heard or was impressed by and have a coffee chat or whatnot, and just kind of let that mentorship evolve naturally. The second was ask your manager. Boy, that's a pretty basic one, but go ahead and ask managers and supervisors, is there anyone we'd recommend, or does the company have a formal mentorship program that I can participate in? And the third one was be open to those surprise opportunities when someone approaches you. How fabulous. So 3 really great takeaways there. Sharron, would you like to add anything? You've had some great experiences, I know, with mentorship.
Well, building on what they both said, one of the things that can happen, and it's the surprise that Janelle talked about, we had an affinity group at Procter & Gamble, and there was a really huge gap between my cohort and the women who were following us, because there was turnover. And so the people who were my experience level and above all chose new hires. And I had dinner with my mentee every single week. And she told people in a public meeting that she didn't have anybody. And she said, well, when you looked at me, then I realized, she said, is that what we were doing? And I left that organization 30 years ago. And yesterday I just literally mailed her something. And so it's been pretty much a lifelong bond and relationship. And in my own experience, I had a surprise mentor, and I didn't realize he was advocating for me until he died. He had a heart attack, so he died suddenly. And I looked at my life while he was there and after in that organization, and I could see the impact that he had. So always pay attention to 2 groups of people. Those are the ones you deal with directly and they coach you. But then there are people who advocate for you when you're not in the room to speak for yourself. So it's 2 different groups of people, I think.
Terrific. Such great advice. And I want to remind the audience to please use the chat. We are checking it. I'm kind of monitoring as we go. So I appreciate some of the comments and aha moments. If you have any questions for our panelists, I would love to incorporate your questions as well. And while you think about that, I'll move on to our next question, which is a particularly interesting one we talked about previously when the panelists and I talked. But what skills do you think have made people most successful in their careers, either yourselves or what you've observed in others? And how do they demonstrate and highlight those skills to those around them? Flavia, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, I'm dying to go. So when I was responsible for the early talent programs with Glaxo, GSK, and we had those very robust assessment centers and a bunch of competencies that we would assess people against, their learning agility, their presentation skills, all this good stuff that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. But then I started talking to managers. So what makes a good graduate at a time? So what makes a good graduate? And one thing they said, and it's so aligned to the topic of this session, what they said was being humble. And then I'm like, that's fascinating, right? Because we're all scared about being asking for we need our space in the marketplace, and then the graduates who are successful are those who are humble. So how do we manage to be humble, but also to advocate for ourselves? And then I started looking at those individuals and seeing what did they do. And it's exactly what I said earlier. They put themselves as eligible for opportunities. So they were like, I am interested in doing this project. I'm interested in going to have a rotation in this area because I feel like I qualify, but I'm not entitled. I think that's the key difference. It's like how they say here in the US is one hair of a distance, but it's so important. So I'm still humble, but I'm ready.
Great. Janelle, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I think for me, it is, it's kind of what Sharron was talking about earlier in terms of flexibility. And I would put it as comfort in times of ambiguity. Given, the state of industry, frankly, at any given time, especially if you think about times like now, and I do want to applaud the organizers of the conference and like thinking through the theme of radical collaboration and coming up with a solution when we can't gather physically, behind the scenes and saying, let's have a virtual conference. So really being able to stay calm and focused on objectives and navigating ambiguity, I've seen in terms of people I really respect and how they really present themselves, and something I've focused on and I get as feedback as a strength and something that people really value in what I bring. I think that ambiguity piece is huge, especially as you grow in your career. Less of what you're being asked to do is prescriptive, right? You're tackling bigger, grayer business problems. So being able to navigate those things without becoming overwhelmed, I think is really important.
Well, and Janelle, I would love to tie that point to something that Flavia said earlier. In this time that we're in right now, yes, absolutely, being able to be comfortable with ambiguity. And also, Flavia, you mentioned about figuring out what you can learn from a less than ideal situation. I think as we navigate the next few months and there's job uncertainty and roles are changing and folks are going to need to adjust their expectations a little bit about how their current job might change. And so being comfortable with ambiguity, embracing the learning, even if the role is less than ideal, figuring out what things you can pull from this current position to elevate you to your next role in life. I think it's a really valuable lesson. So I'm kind of weaving back in from about 15 minutes ago into what Janelle just said. So very nicely done, ladies. Sharron, I'm going to allow you to speak to this topic as well, and then we're going to pick up a question from the audience.
Can I pass and pick up a question from the audience? Because there's one that ties back to Janelle.
You
It
bet.
says, how do you deal with people trying to suppress your ideas? When Janelle was talking a minute ago about the team and the way the delegation was, there was a model that we were taught at Procter & Gamble that I use to this day. And it's got at least 4 elements. And it's who, what, why, and how. Sometimes there's a where because it's a big conglomerate. And so sometimes you have to address the where. But in like 30 to 60 seconds, whenever there's a topic, you have to be able and prepared to address the who, the what, the why, and the how. And when you can do that, it's a way of getting buy-in, even when people didn't think that your idea had merit or value. So I'm going to stop there, but I think that one is really useful and people can take that away.
I love it. Thank you. You know what? I was actually going for that one, going to address it to you, Sharron. So we are on the same wavelength. Flavia, did you want to chime in on that topic as well?
I just wanted to make a comment. That was awesome. Thank you. I'm taking it with me. I experienced something a couple of days ago, and I was talking to my fiance about that. So I was in this call, myself, another woman, and a gentleman, and I felt like he wasn't listening to me. I mean, I would say, and he would go on and on and on. And then when she said the same thing I had said, he would repeat and say, hey, like so-and-so said. And actually from home, so my fiance was listening because he was around here and I didn't have the headset on. And when I finished, he was like, this guy was interrupting you all the time. He wasn't listening. And then I was like, oh, I'm glad you noticed, because I thought it was something with me, with my English, with my accent, with me not doing the how, what, and when properly. And he was like, no, I think it's more about him. There's something about him that is not okay. So what I did was I asked somebody else to kind of make my point across and influence him. And we're still working on that because it's been a couple of days. But what I'm trying to say here is sometimes it's not about you, it's about them. They are facing an issue. They have a hard time listening, or they have bias, or you triggered something on them that is, that easy. So thinking about that, I'm not saying it's their responsibility to solve the problem, because we want to own and have results, but don't put everything on yourself when things are also not sticking. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Don't always internalize everything as something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could just add something, I know it's maybe a little bit off track, but I have tried, and I saw a female leader model this behavior, and I thought it was great. But if I'm in moments where that seems to be happening, I try to find a way to give credit back to the person who seems to not be being heard in that meeting. So again, if it's a larger group, and typically with women, people are trying to suppress ideas, I might say something like, well, like Flavia said earlier, and kind of repeat what she said. I saw that behavior modeled, and I just thought it was so helpful in terms of advocating for the other people in the space, especially when we're talking about women.
Can I make a quick comment?
Please.
I love that, because that was something I realized recently, actually here in the US. We need to be allies to ourselves, right? We need to have this in mind. We can be mentors, we can be advocates. Like Shirley was saying, I can talk good things about somebody when they're not in the room. So let's take that role as well, because look at this. So we got the power.
100%. Thank you, Flavia. I was going to pick up on that as well. I think part of the power of this conference, and Janelle hit the nail on the head. We need to advocate for one another and be allies for one another, and help those who may be getting overlooked in a meeting, in a conference, in a conversation, to really be amplified. We can amplify one another. I have another question, and one point I wanted to make, Sharron, I was hoping that if you could add your who, what, why, and how, maybe a little bit of that to the chat or send it to Lavanya. It sounds like it might be something valuable for us to put into the notebook. I think a lot of people are interested in learning more about that. So perhaps we
I'll
could
do that.
ask that. Thank you very much. So another question that came in that I think is a really good one as we start to wind down our time with you all is, can you share a pivotal moment in your career? And I think maybe Sharron, can I start with you?
Okay. For me, it was when I did not get tenure at my first academic appointment. I had to reassess my skill set. And so what I did was the next job I had was a combination academic role with teaching and administrative role. And I've now transitioned towards the administrative side, but you have to always be ready and be prepared to know who you are. We keep coming back to that. Know who you are, know what skills you bring, and be ready to sell that skill set to somebody.
I love it. I love it. Janelle, did you like to add something?
I think for me, it was taking a new job. So I think, Flavia, you hinted at this maybe earlier in your career, how to think through when is the right time to move. I think when I moved to Jet.com, which is owned by Walmart, that was very, that was super intentional, very well thought out. And I feel like the impact that it had on my career was clear. So I took a role in seasonal marketing, which in retail, that means holiday, which is crazy. But I just had a very clear point of view on what I wanted to get out of the experience, what part of the industry I wanted to be in, what type of work I wanted to do. And so the move was super intentional, and my trajectory has been, I've seen faster growth after making that really thoughtful decision.
Terrific, terrific. Flavia, I'm going to ask you to combine your answer to this question with the last one, which is, I want each of the panelists to share in our last few minutes just one radical idea that the audience members can implement today to help them advocate for their lives.
Yeah, I think I've had many pivotal moments. I think I just experienced one moving to Lenovo, and I wanted to be in the diversity and inclusion space. I wanted to go global again because that was one of my strengths, and I also wanted to be in technology. So I think that's very recent, and like you said, Janelle, it was very intentional. But I think one example of me advocating for myself, and I wanted to give this tip was when I came to the US. So I was having a great time in Brazil with my husband at the time, had a great job, earning good money. But then one of our peers in our global team changed jobs, and one role was available in the UK. And then there was something inside of me that said, I want to do this. I want to leave Brazil. I want to see the world again. And I just went and asked if he would consider me. And then he goes back and says, well, actually, we would rather have you in the US doing this and that. And anyway, so I think the tip that I'm giving here is I heard that little voice inside of me. I didn't know exactly the logic for that, but I heard that and I put it out there and said, well, let's see what's going to happen. And here I am 4 years later, and my life has changed completely. So yeah, listen to that little something here and go for it.
Fantastic, fantastic. Sharron, do you have one radical idea that everyone can implement today?
Find your tribe and make it a group of people who can support you in your work and provide social support away from your work.
Excellent, so important. Janelle.
I would challenge anybody, if there's something that you've been wanting to ask for, and maybe not feeling like you've earned it, but potentially you have, I would challenge you to ask for that thing as soon as you can. Again, take all the advice from all the panelists today about, make sure, have you earned this? That it's not coming from a place of entitlement, that you're being really self-aware, that you're building a plan that's super clear about the value that you're bringing to the business. But I would really challenge anybody that's maybe running more into fear. That's the biggest barrier, to ask for that thing. I tend to make decisions thinking through things like, what's the worst case scenario? And if the worst case scenario is a no, then that's really not that bad.
That's right. Be brave, right? Be brave. Don't fear the no.
Don't fear the no.
I don't know how, we can't do applause, but we can do hand applause, but I want to thank each of my wonderful panelists, Flavia, Sharron, Janelle. I know you've been fabulous today. Thank you for your time. Your insights have been much appreciated. There appear to be a lot of folks who've taken aha moments away. So thank you again. And I encourage everyone to continue on with the Innovative Women's Conference today. Go back to the main room and enjoy the rest of your day with us.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, Caren.
Thank you so much.
You all.